So I've had a bit of a weird 2 weeks or so. I'm busy dealing with a friend who is busy passing away as we speak, and he's what I would term a lazy atheist. He's never thought very deeply or long and hard about life and death and eternity, and just doesn't believe that there's a God, but only because he hasn't really thought that deeply about it. And then in the last 2 weeks, I've had conversations with two friends of mine who grew up in the church with me, and both of them have abandoned their faith in the last year or couple of years, and they haven't just stopped coming. They've made an active decision to abandon their faith, to leave their faith. And then my week changed, and around Wednesday, I found a picture of Rich in Sunday school. Jen, he was a little cutie. Hey, you guys did well there. And I promised him that I wouldn't give it to anybody. But if you download the Church Center app, we can make it available to you without me necessarily giving it to you. So it made my week, but then looking at the photo got me thinking in the context of what I'd been processing in the last 2 weeks or so. And there was probably 20 or 30 people in that photo of Rich's Sunday school class. And I thought to myself, of those 20 or 30 people, I wonder how many of them are faithfully and fruitfully serving Jesus 40, whatever it is, years later. I wonder. I don't know for sure, obviously, but I've got a pretty good idea. And I don't think that number is lots. I think that number is few. Carrie Nieuwhof is an author that I follow. He says, he's observed very few balanced elderly people. So what he means by that is when you're young, your life is balanced. You have cynicism and hope. You are grumpy and you're happy. You have good days and you have bad days. You have ups and downs. You have happy and sad. And by a certain point in your life, you tend to land on one side of that line. So when you're young, your life balances this and that, but the older you get, the less balanced your life becomes, and you tend, by a certain point in your life, you tend to land on one of those two sides of the line. And so either you've grown up to be happy and grateful, or you've grown to be bitter and grumpy. And as you get older, you become more of who you already are. And so that got me back to thinking about some of the people that I'd been dealing with over the last couple of weeks, and then the thought process that had led me down Rich's Sunday school class photo. And the thought that I was left with was this: what is the common denominator in elderly people who have served Jesus faithfully and fruitfully over a long period of time and are still happy and grateful as opposed to bitter and grumpy? What is the common denominator in all of those people? And here's the conclusion that I've come to. They have remained fully functioning parts of the body. All of them have remained fully functioning parts of the body. Nearer the end of my life, I want to be faithful and I want to be fruitful. I want to be still faithfully loving Jesus and loving his church, and I also want my life to still have purpose. I want to be fruitful nearer the end of my life, and I also don't want to be bitter and grumpy. I can be faithful and fruitful and bitter and grumpy. I don't want that. I want to be grateful and happy at the same time. What I've observed in people that have got this right, many of them in this church, is that those people have remained functioning members of the body. What do I mean when I say the word body? Paul says this in 1 Corinthians 12. Just as a body, though one, has many parts, but all of its many parts form one body, so it is with Christ. For we were all baptized by one Spirit so as to form one body, whether Jews or Gentiles, slave or free, and we were all given the one Spirit to drink. Even so, the body is not made up of one part, but of many. Now, if the foot should say, because I'm not a hand, I don't belong to the body, it would not for that reason stop being a part of the body. If the ear should say, because I'm not an eye, I don't belong to the body, it would not for that reason stop being a part of the body. If the whole body were an eye, where would the sense of hearing be? If the whole body were an ear, where would the sense of smell be? Paul's using logic here. But in fact, God has placed the parts in the body, every one of them, just as he wanted them to be. For if they were all one part, where would the body be? As it is, there are many parts, one body. The eye cannot say to the hand, I don't need you. The head cannot say to the feet, I don't need you. On the contrary, those parts of the body that seem to be weaker are indispensable. Those parts of the body that are invisible are invaluable. The parts that we think are less honorable, we treat with special honor. The parts that are unpresentable, we treat with modesty, and while our presentable parts need no special treatment. But God has put the body together, giving greater honor to the parts that lacked it, so that there should be no division in the body, and that its parts should have equal concern for each other. For if one part suffers, every part suffers with it. If one part is honored, every part rejoices with it. It seems to me that the reason many people don't remain fully functioning parts of the body is either they don't know what their function in the body is, or they are unhappy with what their function in the body is. They desire a different function, or they know what it is and they just don't want to do it. Just too lazy. Or unfaithful, probably. Paul says in verse 22 that the parts that are invisible, the parts of the church that help it function and are not seen, are invaluable to the functioning of the body. Consider for a moment your internal organs. No one is marrying somebody else because of how well their kidneys function. You don't get promoted at work because of how well your arteries work. You're not friends with somebody because both of your livers function the same way, right? Yet all of those parts of the body, if they don't function, you cease to live. You cease to exist. They are invisible, yet they are invaluable. And Paul says it's the same is true of the church. The unseen parts are invaluable. The unseen parts of the body are vital to its functioning. Friends, pastor is not the only gift that the church needs to function well. God hasn't said, here's a church and we'll give the church pastors and that's it. No, he says there is an entire body. And for the church to function well, the scripture says, it's the same as the body. It requires all the parts of the body, seen and unseen. Those perceived as important, those perceived as less important, to function correctly in the body. And it's this ability to keep functioning in the body that I've observed as being the reason that people are both fruitful and faithful, happy and grateful towards the end of their lives. Friends, the longer that you live out your faith without being a functioning member of the body, the less fruitful you will become. You might start out and be okay, but the longer you are a follower of Christ without being a functioning member of a body, the less fruitful you will become. Whereas the way of Scripture should be the longer you do it, the more fruitful you become. And actually, the longer you don't do it, the longer you are not a functioning member of a body, the less faithful you will become. And also, the more you will drift to the grumpy and, whatever I said, the grumpy and bitter side of that line as opposed to the happy and grateful side. You will begin to drift. A man called Craig Johnson says this: if you are not secure in being invisible, you will never feel valuable. If you are not secure in being invisible, you will never feel valuable. Value doesn't come from being seen. Your value doesn't come from somebody else saying, look how good you are doing, I see what you're doing, and then that gives you value. If you are not secure by being invisible, you will never feel value by being seen. And at the same time, when you are secure in who God has called you to be, then you will be content anyway. I want you to feel valuable today, and I want all of us to be content. So I'm speaking to those who are struggling with what God has called you to do, either because you don't know what it is, or because you desire a more visible gift. And I'm also speaking to those that are currently functioning parts of the body, and I'm speaking to us to remain functioning parts of the body. I want all of us to still be faithfully and fruitfully following Jesus, happy and grateful near the end of our lives. And the way that we do this is to become and then stay functioning parts of the body. Can we be secure in our invisible functions in the body because they are invaluable? Can we be secure in who God has called us to be so that we can be content anyway? See, I knew from a fairly young age that who God had called me to be was a pastor. And so whether I was working in construction as a project manager, whether I was working in health and safety, or whether I was working at the church, I was still secure and content in who God had called me to be. The rest of it didn't really matter. Whether I was visible and seen, whether people acknowledged me and said, thank you so much, you're doing a great job, or not, I was still content. I knew who God had called me to be. I was secure. And so you might be sitting here today thinking, that's great, but I'm actually not sure of who God has called me to be. You're asking me to be a functioning part of the body, but I'm not sure what my function is. Where do I start? So if that's you today, the starting point of what God has called all of us to, the starting point of God's call in all of our lives is sonship. We start from a place of sonship. We are children of God. And then what we need to do from that point is to look at what's in our hands. What God has called you to do has two parts. It's identity and it's purpose. Your identity is rooted in I'm a child of God. Your purpose is what has God put in my hands? What am I good at? What do I enjoy doing? That's your purpose. When your identity and your purpose meet each other, that is the starting point of your calling. What has God called you to do? It's an identity and purpose. You can't just take purpose and you can't just take identity. You have to marry your identity with your purpose. That is the starting point of your calling. If you're sitting here this morning saying, I want to function, cool, you've got me, you've hooked me, I want to function, what should I do? What is God calling me to do? Identity and purpose. When you marry your identity with your purpose, that is the starting point of what God called you to do, and it grows from there. When secure children of God begin to work with what is in their hands, they begin to change the world. It's the starting point of calling, but it's also the starting point of security and contentment. It's the start of what will keep you being a functioning member of the body. I think so many people worry about what is the right thing for me. I'm going to wait until the right thing makes itself magically available, and then I'll plug in the right place and I'll do the right thing. Friends, when a body is growing in the womb, the body doesn't need to concern itself, or will the eye settle in the right place, and will the foot form in the right place? No, all that fetus needs to do is remain connected to the body. When the fetus remains connected to the body, all of those body parts will settle themselves in the right place. And so it's not what I'm asking of you this morning is not to find the best place. I'm not even asking you to find the right place. I'm asking you to find a place. Find a place and begin to work with what God has put in your hands. And if you remain connected to the body, you will settle into the right place. But if you focus on finding the right place, you'll never find it because you won't be doing anything. You'll be waiting for the right place to magically land in your lap. It doesn't happen. Start in a place and remain connected to the body. You will settle by yourself, and the body will settle you into the right place. So why is this important? We spoke about the type of Christian that you want to be when you're 75, but there's another important reason that this is important. Ephesians chapter 1 says this: God has placed all things under his, being Christ's, feet, and appointed him to be the head over everything for the church, which is his body. So it says that Christ is the head, the church is the body, and God has placed all things under his feet. But the feet and the head, the feet are not connected to the head by itself, right? It's not just a foot and a head, there's a body in between. The body is what aligns the head with the feet. So if everything is under the feet of Christ and we are the body, by extension that means that everything is under our feet also, if we are a part of the body. It says all things, every dark elemental force in the world, all sin, all distortion, all powers and principalities, all addiction, all hatred and anger and malice, all of these things have been placed under the feet of Christ, and by extension, under the feet of us, the church, his body. And yet so often these things still have power over us. They seem to be not under our feet, they seem to be in our heads. And they seem to be in our hearts. I think this is often because we are not a part of the body. And so if everything is under the feet of the head and the body, but we are not a part of the body, that means that it's not under our feet. When we remove ourselves from the body, those elemental forces that I spoke about, the dark powers of this world, are no longer under our feet because we are not under the head and part of the body. And so when we pull ourselves out of the body, those sinful forces begin to dominate us as opposed to being under our feet. Friends, if you're here this morning and you are wondering, why can I not break this? Why is the power of sin present in my heart? It's dominating my mind. Why is that? Might I suggest one of the reasons could be that you are not a functioning part of the body. You have pulled yourself out of the body, and so it is no longer under your feet, but it's actually over your mind. See, when you abandon the body, you abandon the head. You cannot have the head without the body. And so the things that are under Christ's feet are no longer under our feet when we are not functioning parts of the body. So we want to be a part of the body, absolutely, but we also want to be a functional part of the body. There's some parts of the body that are dysfunctional. And when the individual parts fulfill their function, when the individual parts fulfill their purpose, some of them seen, some of them unseen, then the body is functioning and not dysfunctioning. And when the body is functioning well, the body starts to fulfill its purpose. The purpose of the body is to point a dying world to the head, to Christ. That is the purpose of the body, right? That's what Ephesians chapter 3 says. But when the individuals in the body don't fulfill their purpose, when the individuals in the body don't work with their calling, then the body begins to dysfunction. And when the body begins to dysfunction, the purpose of the body to point the world to Jesus is diluted. It's compromised. It's watered down. That's why Jesus prays that his church would be one. He prays that his church would be in unity. Jesus doesn't have 10,000 bodies. Jesus doesn't have 10,000 bodies, and some of them are working and others not so much, and some of them are just, there's a detached hand over there doing a bit of good work, and some of these bodies have no lungs or hearts, and others have one big leg and one skinny leg, and they run in a circle. No, Jesus has one body. He has one body. And the purpose of the church, according to Ephesians chapter 3, Paul says, through the church, the manifold wisdom of God is made known to the rulers and authorities in heavenly realms. He's expounding on what he said in Ephesians chapter 1. In Ephesians chapter 1, he says, everything is under the feet of Christ and the body. And he says, and through the church, through the body, the manifold wisdom of God is made known to powers and principalities. How? By putting them under their feet. That's how. And so the purpose of the church, that is the purpose of the church. And for the church to fulfill its purpose, you need to fulfill your purpose. Because when I don't, and when you don't, the body becomes dysfunctional. And when the body is dysfunctional, it cannot fulfill its purpose very well. So we can see that how we function according to our calling and purpose is vital to the mission of church. And it's also vital to how well we live the rest of our lives. Let's talk for a minute about dysfunction. What are some of the things that cause individuals not to fulfill their purpose in a body? And so we cause the body to dysfunction and the witness of the church to be diluted. He's not here today, but in honor of one of our elders, Gert Muller, 3 quick things, and then we're done. It's his favorite saying. Thank you. Number 1, what causes the body to dysfunction? Cynicism. Cynicism is the emotional state. The bodily state of cynicism is callousness. To be calloused. You know what it is to have a callus? Your mom buys you new school shoes, one size too big because you want them to last the whole year in January, right? And the first couple of days you wear them, you get a blister. Your mom says you will keep wearing them because I bought them for you, right? And so if you keep wearing the shoes when you got a blister, what happens is a callus forms. You become, instead of your foot being constantly sore there, it gets hard. So it stops feeling. And when you are developing a callus, you begin to walk with a limp. Cynicism is emotional callousness. Cynicism is being emotionally callous. You and I, you know people who are cynical. We all know people who are cynical. Cynicism is not always a conscious decision. People don't wake up in the morning, one morning, and say, you know what, today I'm going to be cynical. It's not a conscious decision, but it is still a decision. Cynical people decide to stop hoping. Cynical people decide to stop trusting. They decide to stop believing. They don't decide to be cynical. They just decide to stop doing things that stop them being cynical. A cynical person always believes the worst. Cynics never have any room for hope. In Paul's great passage on love in 1 Corinthians 13, which is an extension of 1 Corinthians 12, where he speaks about the body, then he says, I'll show you a more excellent way, a most excellent way. And he speaks his whole disposition on his discourse on love. And he closes that chapter in 1 Corinthians 13, and he says, these 3 things remain, faith, hope, and love. And if cynicism kills hope, cynics are unable to feel loved, and they are unable to feel love. And it will eventually, when you are cynical, it will eventually affect your faith, because you cannot have faith if hope is dead. And so when cynicism begins to take root in your heart, what happens is it causes hope to die. When hope dies, all you are left with is cynicism, and cynicism will paralyze you. Being cynical will paralyze you. But nobody starts out cynical. I've never met a cynical 6-year-old. Something made us cynical. Cynicism doesn't start because you don't care about something. Cynicism starts because you did care about something, and something or someone let you down. You don't get a callus because you're not working. You get a callus because you did work and something wasn't quite right. You got let down. when you dig a little bit deeper, you'll find that most cynics are former optimists. They used to be people who were led by hope, and then they got injured. And cynicism started to take root, and it grew, and then it snuffed out hope, and they became crippled. Cynicism will cause you to not function correctly in the body. It will cause you to look at the rest of the body with suspicion and criticism, and to not bother to do your part, because it's actually not worth it. Cynics never get involved because it's not worth it. My part doesn't count. Those other guys will get it wrong anyway. So the foot says, you know what, I'm not going to run today. I'm just going to limp. I'm not going to run today because the other foot's going to let me down anyway. Or the knee's going to give out. You can tell I played squash recently. Cynicism will then begin to affect your relationship with God, because when we close our heart to people, we close our heart to God. Remember that we can't have the head without the body. When we leave the body, we leave the head also. So if cynicism affects our relationship with people, by extension, it then affects our relationship with God. The thing about cynicism is that others can see it quite easily in you, and actually you are not unaware of it. If cynicism has taken root and is growing in your heart, you will not be unaware that it's there. Pride is quite different to that, right? Pride can be hard to spot in yourself. Cynicism is not. You will be very aware that you woke up today more cynical than you were yesterday. Cynics project their past hurt and their past failures onto the future, and they say, I'm going to protect my future from harm, because I'm projecting that past hurt onto the future, and so therefore the future won't be painful. But all they're doing is not protecting their future; they're infecting their current with their past, infecting their today with our yesterday's hurt. If you've identified cynicism growing in your heart, here's where you can start to deal with that. Become curious. Curious people are not cynics, and every cynical person that I've ever met is not curious. They know everything. Nothing can surprise them. Develop a curiosity about God. I've never taught a cynical person anything about God that they don't already know. Develop a curiosity about God. Develop a curiosity about Scripture. A curiosity about the church, about the people around you, and about life. Explore, be open, wonder what things could be different. If things were different, what could it be like? What could happen? What could look differently? All of these are childlike qualities, right? And children are not cynical for a reason. They are curious. Cynicism will cause the body to dysfunction. And when the individual parts of the body dysfunction, the purpose of the body to fulfill Jesus, to point people to Jesus, is diluted. What causes the body to dysfunction? Number 2, offense. The emotional state is wounded. The emotional state is offended. The bodily state is wounded. Wounds cause offense, and offense causes wounds. To keep using Paul's analogy from 1 Corinthians 12, he says that the eye can't say to the hand, I don't need you. Have you ever stubbed your toe on something? I like living most of my life barefoot as much as I can. If you want to understand how many swear words a person knows, be with them when they stub their toe. Right? They will very quickly tell you what type of swear words that person knows. Here's the thing though, when you stub your toe, the eye doesn't get upset with the toe for stubbing itself, right? It's the toe that got stubbed, but yet somehow it's the whole body that hurts. You feel that pain in your teeth when you stub your toe. But likewise, the toe doesn't blame the eye or the foot for not avoiding the stub. The toe doesn't go around and say, stupid eye, stupid foot, why didn't you just pick me up a bit further? Right? The toe doesn't pick itself up. It's relying on the foot and the ankle and the knee and it's relying on somebody else to not hurt it. And when it gets hurt, it doesn't blame the foot. It doesn't blame the knee. So the bottom line is this, friends. If we are part of a body, our bodies are vulnerable to pain. Every day that we wake up, by virtue of the fact that we have a body, our bodies are vulnerable to pain. You know who doesn't feel pain? Psychopaths and dead people. Those are the only people that don't feel pain. See, a healthy functioning body is vulnerable to pain, but when it stays together, a healthy functioning body is also incredibly resilient. The human body is incredibly resilient, able to withstand much hardship and pain, but only when it stays together. The toe that is stubbed for the 5th time this week and eventually says, you know what, that's it, I'm leaving. The eye and the foot are conspiring to keep stubbing me. I'm out of here. Soon as the toe makes that decision and leaves, he dies. When the toe leaves the body, he dies. Because when you leave the body, you don't have blood flowing to you, and when there's no blood flowing, there's death. Are you wondering why there's a lack of resilience in your life? Could it be that you've disconnected from the body? The body needs blood to flow through it for it to be resilient, and for wounds to heal. A wounded toe doesn't heal by itself. You cut the toe off, it doesn't heal. For it to heal, it has to be connected to the body so that blood can flow to it. Offense isn't a reason. Wounds are not a reason to cut yourself off from the body. They are a reason to connect deeper to the body. The healing for your wound is found through connection to the body. The blood doesn't flow from the head to the heart via Bluetooth to the toe. It's got to flow via connection. If the body is disconnected, if the body is dysfunctional, if my veins and my arteries are not functioning as they should, if my knee, if there's bad circulation in my ankle and what, my toe is not going to get the blood. The toe has to stay connected, and then all the individual parts of my body have to do their function correctly so that the blood can flow, so that healing can take place. Blood flow is what fights infection. When there's an infection, blood flows to it, and the white blood cells fight the infection. That's why pus forms. Pus is a sign that the body is fighting infection at that point. Amputated limbs don't have any pus. Amputated limbs are unable to fight infection. So when you amputate a limb, it rots and dies. It cannot fight infection. I think there's too many parts of the body that are infected, and the reason for this is that blood is not flowing. And blood is not flowing either because the infected parts have detached from the body, or the rest of the body is not doing its job in transporting blood to those infected areas. Do you find yourself less and less fazed by the infection of sin? The infection of sin in your heart, the infection of sin in the world around us. Do you find that infection phases you less and less? If it phases you less and less as you are prolonging, it could be that you are not connected to the body. Because when you are connected to the body, infection will be fought as a part of the body. What causes dysfunction in the body? Cynicism, offense. And number 3, atrophy. One of my sons broke his arm a few years ago. And the orthopedic surgeon that we had at the time was quite a conservative one. And so we had about 8 weeks. He was on a cast for about 8 weeks. And when it came to the end of those 8 weeks, he cut his cast off, and we quickly realized 2 things. Number 1, it smelled like warm cheese. That delicious combination of potato salad and knickknacks. It smelled like that. And number 2, he immediately had one really skinny arm and one normal arm. The arm that had been sitting in a cast for 8 weeks looked like the arm of a 5-year-old when he was a 15-year-old. For those 8 weeks, all the muscles in that arm hadn't been used, and so they wasted away. The muscles, every muscle in that arm literally ceased to exist. It disappeared. It atrophied. I don't know if you've ever tried to play a sport that you used to play and be really good at, but you haven't played for a while, and so you got onto the field and backed yourself, if you've ever done that. Or you just went for a long walk on the beach when you haven't walked for a while, if you've ever done that even. You will quickly realize that when you don't use muscles, they disappear. They cease to exist. They atrophy. See, the body doesn't keep muscles for a rainy day. The body doesn't store up muscles for the one time that you might need them to look good. If muscles are not used, they literally cease to exist. They atrophy. Do you know the only thing that the body stores up for a rainy day? Fat. That's the only thing that a body stores up. And that's all we'll say on that, I suppose. It is the only thing. Everything else that the body does not use, it expels. It literally wastes away. Every other piece of waste in your body is dispelled by the body. The only thing that the body that is not used, that the body stores up, is fat. Your spiritual muscle is what you are actively doing with your calling. Remember we said your calling has two parts. It is your identity and your purpose. That's the birthplace of your calling, is your identity. Is your identity and your purpose. What you do with your calling is your spiritual muscle. How you use that calling, how often you use it, how well you use it, how disciplined you are with it, how you exercise it, that is your spiritual muscle. If you are not using it, if it is sitting 8 weeks at a time, 5 years at a time, it will atrophy. It will disappear. It will cease to exist. The body does not store up muscle for a time when you might need it. And when you don't use your spiritual muscle, it starts to atrophy and it causes dysfunction in the body. And so we have churches with one skinny arm and one normal arm. Churches that can't run fast because hamstrings have atrophied. Churches that can't think deeply and clearly because brains have atrophied. Churches that can't love well because hearts are atrophied. When we don't use our spiritual muscles, they atrophy, and then the body becomes dysfunctional. And when the body is dysfunctional, its purpose to point people to Jesus becomes compromised. This has an effect on the church's witness, how you use your calling. Friends, Christianity is a full-time calling. It's not a part-time calling, and it's not a pastime activity. When we think of our faith as part-time, something that we do on a weekend, on a Sunday, maybe one night of the week if we meet in a life group. When we think of it as a pastime activity, something that we partake in when we have a little bit of spare time. This is my life, I live my life, and then when in my pastime, Christianity is one of the activities that I do in my pastime, like playing paddle. It's just something that I do every now and again. When we think of that, our muscles atrophy, and the body becomes dysfunctional. And so what I'm asking you to do this morning is not to volunteer more of your spare time to come and serve the church when she gathers. You should do that. Great, wonderful, that's important. We should all be doing that. But that's not what I'm calling you to this morning. You're not using your spiritual muscles to serve coffee to people. We need good people serving coffee. We need more people serving coffee. And we need good coffee, Lord knows. But that's not what I'm calling you to today. I'm calling you to serve the church when she scatters. You see, the church gathers on a Sunday and then it scatters from a Monday to a Saturday. And some people's gifts serve the church when the church gathers. So if your gift is preaching or teaching or leading worship, your gift serves the church when it gathers on a Sunday. If your gift is not that, you're most likely, for the majority of people, your gift will serve the church when the church scatters from a Monday to a Saturday. Just because you volunteer on a Sunday doesn't mean you are using your spiritual muscles. If your spiritual muscle is to serve the church where you work, where you live, where you play, where you eat, where you have relationship and family and influence and agency, that is your spiritual muscle, your identity and your purpose, what's in your hands, Monday to Saturday. If you are not doing that, you can volunteer at every Sunday service you can and serve as much coffee as we are able to produce. You're still not using your spiritual muscle. So when the church gathers, the family gets together. We all have chores. We should serve in a chore. Wonderful. I'm not asking you to do more of that today. I am, but that's not the purpose of today. I'm asking you to find your identity and your purpose and use that as your calling. Develop that and develop your spiritual muscle from a Monday to a Saturday. See, volunteering on a Sunday doesn't make you a part of the body if you are not also using your spiritual muscle during the week. And if you're not using them, they will atrophy and the body will become dysfunctional. I want all of us here today to get nearer the end of our lives and to still be serving Jesus faithfully and fruitfully and doing it with the disposition of happy and grateful, not bitter and grumpy. The only way to do this is to remain connected to the head, Jesus, by remaining connected to the body. We must fight cynicism. We must resist offense. And we must not allow our spiritual muscles to atrophy. Coming to church, volunteering, knowing all the words to your favorite worship song, having a Bible verse as your TikTok profile doesn't make you part of the body. You can serve the body and still not be a part of it. A shower serves my body, cleans me. But just because it serves my body, it doesn't make me a part of it. So please hear what I'm saying. Volunteers must come, must serve in chore. Those are all good things. Just because you serve the body, it does not make you a part of the body. Sitting at the table of Christ is what makes you a part of the body. There's confusion at the moment, so and over the last little month or two, about who sits at the table of Christ. Some people think that everybody sits at the table of Christ. Friends, I don't believe it to be true. Everybody comes to the cross of Christ. At the cross of Christ, everybody is welcomed and accepted as you are. The cross of Christ is for everybody. The table of Christ is for this body. The table of Christ is for believers, for followers, for disciples. That is who the table of Christ is for. It is sitting at the table that keeps us connected to the body, not coming to the cross. The cross is where we are saved. The cross is where we find salvation. That's why it's for everybody. The table is where we get discipled. That's why it is only for his body. So we want to stay connected. We want to stay functioning as part of the body of Christ. But more importantly than that, what I'm calling us to do today is also sit at the table of Christ, to sit with other disciples, to have a meal, and as often as we do so, to do it in remembrance of Jesus. It's not just about fulfilling our purpose, because our purpose always has to flow out of our identity, and we find our identity sitting at the table of Christ. We said your calling is your identity and your purpose, and I find my identity sitting at the table of Christ.